Hey friends, what is up and welcome back to my channel. As you can tell from the title of today's video, it is time to do my June wrap up. Keep wanting to say May, keep wanting to say July. I just want to skip June completely apparently. I actually had a pretty good reading month in the month of June, however. I was pleasantly surprised because the beginning of the month I wasn't reading a whole lot, and then all of a sudden towards the end of the month I did read a ton. So I'm going to break it down for you guys before I get started. So I did read one audiobook, one graphic novel, one manga, and then 6 normal books. A lot of these are from the library, so I will put pictures here for the books that I do not currently still have. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to start from my least favorite to my most favorite. Overall, however, I did read 3,130 pages, which is more than I read last month, so that is good. I did get some comments on last month's video when I posted this that people didn't want me to be discouraged or really focus on the number, and that's not actually why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I want to see my overall stats at the end of the year, and I want to kind of track my mental health when it comes to my reading. If I'm feeling really down, I want to see if I'm reading more or if I'm reading less. So that is actually why I'm doing this, and then at the end of the year I'm going to see like my overall and then kind of look at overall how my year was mentally as well. So that is actually why I'm doing it. But starting off with the book that I liked the least, that would have to be My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness. I'll put a picture here for you guys because that is actually a book that my roommate lent me. I did not like this book. I ended up giving it 2 stars. I feel like for some people it might be an enjoyable read. I know it is a very popular manga, but for me, the main character was really, really unlikable, and not in a likable, unlikable kind of way. Like, you guys know, I like unlikable characters. They are some of my favorites, but she was just very odd. And basically what the story follows is a young girl. She lives in Japan. She's getting a little bit older, and she's trying to figure out why she's never had a relationship, why she doesn't really have intimacy with people, and she's sort of discovering that she is a lesbian. So she does go to a, I don't want to call it like, it's basically a sex hotel where you can like meet up with people to have sex, like you hire them to do it. So she hires a woman to do that with her. And the woman actually just ends up like washing her hair and taking a bath with her, and they don't really have sex. And the story, I feel like, could be really valuable for some people because our main character does also suffer from depression. She suffers from anxiety. She suffers from self-harm. So I feel like it's a story that a lot of people would enjoy hearing about or would enjoy learning about, or maybe they experience it themselves so they can kind of relate to it. Now, I do suffer with all of those things, or, you know, have suffered with them in the past, and I still didn't really like her. This is a memoir. It is a book written by a woman, and this is the story that she actually lives. So it is a memoir, and I just wish I would have liked it because I know a lot of people do, but for me it just wasn't. It was like definitely bottom of the list of things that I read this month. I believe there are like 4 or 5 of them, and I won't be continuing on. Now, the next book I want to talk about is my 3-star read of the month, and it was very interesting. I didn't really know going into it what to expect. This was actually recommended to me from Jessie from Bow Ties and Books. I'll leave their channel down below for you guys. I wanted to like this, and I didn't hate it. I ended up giving it like a 3-star, and it'd be Nama. This is a book that follows Noah's wife, and it is kind of like a present-day flashback kind of thing. So when the book first starts, they are on the Ark. If you're not familiar with Noah's Ark, where have you been? Basically, Noah and his family are commissioned by God to build this giant ark because he's going to flood the world, and they need to put, I think it's 2 of every unclean animal and then 8 of every clean animal, 6 or 8 of every clean animal onto the ark. Now, this is obviously a retelling. The reason why I liked this story but didn't like this story, Nama in this story is a lesbian. Well, maybe she's bisexual because she does also really love Noah, and she does love having sex with Noah, but most of her partners in this book are girls. And it was really interesting. It's an interesting take on it, and that's kind of where like what I liked about the story kind of ended. I always thought Noah's Ark, like the story of Noah's Ark, was an interesting story to begin with, so a retelling of that really appealed to me. But this story is told more in like dream sequences, and there's not really like an actual plot of the book for me, at least. I didn't feel like there was. It was a lot of dream sequences of her like being off the boat and just having these really crazy dreams and like exploring the world inside of these dreams and meeting like other gods and stuff and meeting angels. And you know, you think that'd be really cool, but for me it was like I wanted an actual plot and I didn't really get it. As well as the writing style for this book is very clinical. It's very like, this is what's happening. Like, Nama did this, Noah did this, her sons did this, this is what's happening. And it didn't really speak to me. The writing style is what really drug this book down for me. I think I could have gotten over the dream sequency kind of stuff happening if it would have been a better writing style. Now, this book, I will say, is definitely just a very feminist, very sexual, lesbian represented kind of book. but for me, it was a little lackluster. Like I said, the writing I didn't like and the dream sequences I didn't like either, but I think a lot of people will like this. Now, the one recommendation I have is do not get on Goodreads and read the reviews for this. This is definitely a book you should read. Just pick it up and check it out if it sounds interesting to you. It's less than 300 pages, but the reviews on Goodreads are a lot of Christian people saying they're very upset with the retelling and how Nama is retold, and it did bring the rating down. So I wouldn't really go with the rating on Goodreads. Definitely pick it up, check it out, see what you think about yourself. So I did like it. I just didn't absolutely love it. Now I'm going to get into the 4-star reads that I had this month. The first one that I have, I actually really enjoyed this. This is one of my favorite comic books I've ever read, and it'd be Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me. And the reason why I really, really liked this book is because what it follows, our main character, Freddie, who is the dark-haired girl here on the cover, is dating this girl right here, Laura Dean, And it starts out with Laura Dean basically cheating on Freddie and them kind of breaking up. And Laura is trying to somehow get Laura Dean to commit and to stay with her, and they're trying to work it out. Or at least Freddie's trying to work it out. The reason why I really like this is it has a lot of representation when it comes to lesbian couples and gay couples. There's a gay couple in this as well, but it also kind of blurs the line between like polyamory and whether or not you need to be with just one person, and I really liked that. Freddie does want to be with one person though. She obviously wants to be with Laura Dean. There's a lot of heavy hitting topics in here. I don't want to give spoilers for it, but there is a bit of a relationship between an older man and a younger girl, and that is the one reason why I ended up giving this 4 stars instead of 5, is I'm not sure of the age of the people involved in that situation, and it made me really uncomfortable and it left a bad taste in my mouth, and that is why. But unfortunately those things do happen, and to see it represented is nice, so that's why I ended up giving it 4 stars. The art style in this is stunning. It is done very, very well. If you read Bloom, which I have read before, it does have like a pink, or it has a blue and white theme. This has a pink and white theme, and it is done by the same publishing company. So overall, I really like the representation. I really like Freddie. I really like how the story was resolved. This is a story that I have been wanting for a really long time. Like, I read comics and graphic novels all the time, and I want like a really impactful story to it, and this is the first one I've read that I've been like, this is what people talk about when they absolutely love comic books, and this I think has kind of raised the bar for me when it comes to ones I will in the future really enjoy and recommend, or would be like, maybe you can skip on it. So this is a good one to read. I really, really enjoyed this. Now the next one I want to talk about actually started out as a like 2.5 star read for me and ended up being a 4-star read, and I'm pleasantly surprised, and it'd be Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. I know a lot of people are expecting me to absolutely love this, but I ended up giving it a 4-star read. I am leaning towards 3.5, but I bumped it up to 4 for many reasons. So this story follows our main character, Spensa. She is trying to get into the flight school that her people kind of have on their planet. And the reason why they have it is they are trying to protect themselves from these aliens who come to attack them. But Spensa is up against so much right from the beginning because her father is actually accused of abandoning their people. He used to be one of their best pilots, one of their best fighters, and he was essentially, killed because he abandoned them in one of the most important fights when Spensa was very, very young. So Spensa does get into the flight school, and she is trying to make a name for herself, but obviously because of that, their people have kind of shunned her and her family. Her mom, her grandma, and her are disadvantaged. They're not able to get jobs that other people are able to get. The plot of this story sounded really, really cool. My main issue when I first started reading this book, there are 2 things. One, I didn't like Spensa. Spensa is one of those characters who, because she's kind of down and out, she likes to be like, well, I am gonna, walk on your corpse and crush your skull. And she's very she's one of those characters, and those are not my favorite. As well as this writing style. I was expecting it to be phenomenal because everyone talks about Brandon Sanderson and how wonderful his writing is. And I found a lot of redundant sentences in the beginning of the book. I found a lot of just regurgitated information, and it bugged me. But the world building and the characters were done really well, even if I didn't necessarily appreciate Spensa. I thought they were written well. Just the writing style was not what I was expecting, so a little bit of disappointment there. Getting further along into the story, however, about I would say the last 1/4 of the book, I was so shocked. So Spensa has some of the best character growth I've seen ever in a book. She goes from being this really ridiculous character to this really well thought out, very meticulous kind of character, and I enjoyed that. The supporting characters in this as well were some of my favorites. Mbot, which is a spaceship essentially that she finds throughout her journey. I really liked him. I would say he is my favorite character in the entire book. as well as the wrapping up of the story, how Brandon kind of brings everything together and starts revealing some things and explaining other things. You can really tell that he is a master storyteller. So I did really appreciate that as well. So like I said, I did end up giving it 4 stars. I will be picking up the second one. I cannot wait to read it. It just wasn't the book that I thought it was going to be, which is okay because it still ended up being a book that I really enjoyed. Now, the next book I read is actually my audiobook of the month, and that would be The Chamber of Secrets by J.K. Rowling. I want to address something very quickly because I'm getting a lot of comments and questions about this. I read Harry Potter growing up. So as the books were being released, I was 7 or 8 years old. And at that time, the world was very different and authors were very different, and just us as readers were very different. And a lot of things that are not okay to say now were okay to say then, and people, I don't want to say were less sensitive, but I feel like they were less aware of being sensitive. Like they needed to be sensitive, but they weren't. And for me, I think that that is okay. I think that to understand or to enjoy something and then look back on it later and recognize that maybe it's problematic, that's okay because we grow and change. And to realize that those types of things aren't okay, it does take somebody saying it isn't. Now, however, for me, every single book except for The Goblet of Fire by J.K. Rowling will be a 5-star read for me because they are so nostalgic. They are my childhood. They are what, I don't know, I really longed to go to Hogwarts. I really longed to meet the characters. They felt like friends and, you know, brothers and sisters to me. So those books will always be 5-star reads. So if you're wondering why I can look past the problematic stuff, it's because it is so nostalgic, and I understand that it was written for a different time. So I'm not going to talk about that anymore ever again because I keep getting questions about it, and for some reason people look at people who review these books and say that they're wrong or that they're ignoring problematic things. Now, however, I do support reviews for people who are currently reading the series and didn't read it when they were younger. I think it's important to point out problematic things. I will always point out problematic things with these books. There's a lot of, I don't know, just like casual racism. There's not a whole lot of anyone of color in these books. There's no LGBT, there's no handicapped people. I wish there would have been more of that, but at that time I can see maybe why she kept it the way that she did. And I will forever call her out on her shit now because JK has gotten completely out of control with kind of adding things into the story for later. But Chamber of Secrets is it's actually my favorite movie and one of my favorite books, and I have listened to it a couple of times this month. I'm already on my second reread, and I just listen to it when I'm trying to go to bed, and it really does help me. So I'm not going to linger here for too much longer. You guys know what this book is about, but obviously it was a 5-star read for me, and it will forever be a 5-star read for me. The next book I want to talk about is actually a really surprising book that I read this month, and I'm not necessarily sure why, because I pretty much knew that I was going to like it. It'd be Finale by Stephanie Garber. This is the last book in the, I don't even know what it's called, the Carnevale, Legendary, and then Finale. This is the 3rd one. This is the final one. I don't know, the ending kind of was like, well, maybe it's not going to be the last one. I'm not going to stay on here for too long because I don't want to kind of spoil the rest of the series, but I felt like this was a good conclusion. Now, it did have too neat of a conclusion for me. If you're not familiar with what Carnevale is, it's about 2 sisters who are invited to go to this carnival. One of them is kidnapped and the other one has to save them. That's the beginning of the book. Now, this is way down the line. A lot has happened, a lot has changed. My favorite parts of this book are the love interests. I think that they are stunning, and as somebody who was a fan of that going into it, I think that is why I ended up giving it 4 stars. The reason why I gave it 4 instead of 5 is it did kind of lack a little bit in the middle. I was like, it's kind of dragging, a little bit confusing, but overall I still did really, really like it. And I am such a fan of this series. I am going to be picking this up. This is a library copy, but I will be eventually when I get paid buying this book. So I did really, really enjoy it. And if you're a fan of more carnival-y, mystical, you know, kind of like magical realism books, I think this series is really good. Now, bear in mind, it's pretty simple. The story is pretty simple. There's not a whole lot of twists and turns. You can kind of predict some of it, and the writing is very simple, but I do think it is a fun read. Now, my next 4-star book that I read this month is actually Summer of Salt, and I adored this book. So this follows the Fenway sisters, and they live with their mom on this tiny island called By the Sea, and they run this bed and breakfast. And the reason why their bed and breakfast is so successful is there's actually a bird that is indigenous to their island that comes back every year, and it is rumored that is actually a Fenway, like previous sister, previous family member what is that called? Ancestor. And I really like this book. This is an atmospheric book, but this book, so it takes place by the sea, and it is, you know, like one of those rainy islands. The sisters have magic, or one of them has magic. The mom's able to make potions. But what happens is the bird is actually killed, and Mary, one of the sisters, is actually accused of killing the bird. And the reason why I really enjoyed this book is not just because of the magic aspect of it, but because there's so much representation. There's a lesbian couple, there is some topics dealing with like assault and rape and just like sisterly love and like community, and I could stay here for forever. I'll list my review down below because I did a much better job explaining it there. It was a really fun but whimsical read, and I think that those are my favorite. So I did also end up giving this 4 stars. So the second to last book I want to talk about, I ended up giving it a 4.25, so I just rounded it down to 4. And the reason why I gave it a 4 instead of 5 is because it did kind of get a little bit jumbled partway through the book, and I'm not going to stay here for too long because this is a third in the series. This is The Winter of the Witch by Catherine Arden. You guys know I love this series with all of my black little heart. It is one of my most favorites. It basically follows our main character, and she is thrown in between a war of 2 gods. They are brothers, the god of war and the god of death. And it is stunning. It takes place in Russia, so it's very wintry. This is a good winter read, I think, if you're looking for something magical to read over the coming winter months. Genuinely loved it. I think that this is one of the most breathtaking series. This is done so well because our main character is not necessarily very likable. She does dress up as a boy for most of the time, so there is a little bit of gender bending in here as well. And I really liked it. I thought the magic was really well thought out and well placed. I feel like there was a lot of character development. I feel like the story didn't ever really, I mean, it kind of lagged a little bit in this one, but I think it's because we were building up to the conclusion of the story. But like the secondary characters were done really well. I think that everything was explained really well. It's not really hard to follow. So like I said, I don't really want to give away what this one specifically is about because talking about this will ruin the other books for you. But if you've been eyeing this series, The Bear and the Nightingale is the first one. I'll put a picture here. I would recommend it. It is an adult series as well though. So if you are looking for an adult series to read, you'd probably really enjoy this. I haven't met anybody who didn't enjoy this series, so if you've been eyeing it, I would get it. Now, the last book I want to talk about is my favorite read of the month. I think it's going to be the favorite read for a lot of people. I've been seeing some negative reviews, and I can kind of understand why. So when I talk about this, I'm going to talk about this from an American's point of view, and it's going to be red, white, and royal blue. So the reason why I love this book, this follows our main character, Alex. He is the son of the first female president, or I'm assuming she's the first female president, and he has like a rivalry with Prince Henry, obviously from Britain, and the reason is because they are both in the public eye and they do kind of fight for who is more popular, and Alex feels that unnecessary pressure on him because of that. So one day they are at a wedding and they get kind of in like a little bit of a fight and they fall into a cake, and both of their parents, the crown and as well as Alex's mom, decide that they need to fake a friendship, and that fake friendship does eventually lead into a romance. And I think the romance in this was handled very well. It had very little cringe for me. I feel like sometimes when I'm reading male characters, I do feel a little bit of cringe, especially when they are written by female authors, but I did not experience that in this book, and I think it's because Casey kind of understands that it is sensitive. Like, I feel like a lot of people, especially women, consume a lot of male romances, and they don't really consider that there are other kind of romances out there when it comes to the LGBT community. So that was really something that I was kind of worried about, but she handled it very well. Alex being exposed as bisexual is used as a plot device later. I can understand why people didn't like that. Unfortunately, that is something that does happen, and it didn't really bug me as a bisexual, pansexual woman. It didn't bug me at all. The one thing I can see why people didn't like this book is because it does have a lot to do with American politics. And I feel like at this point in time, people are kind of tired of hearing about American politics, especially if you don't live in America. However, this book as an American gave me a lot of hope. Because Alex is gay or is bisexual, because he does have a romance with somebody from Britain, because his mom is the first female president, there's so much represented in this book, and they're from fucking Texas, like one of the most backward states. I think that well, not all of Texas, but a good amount of Texas. My family's from there, don't at me. So I just realized reading this that if you're an American reading this, there is so much to be hopeful for. There's so much that just reading it as like an alternative to what we're currently dealing with and what we're currently living under, that it would fill you with that hope, and it would really make you love this book even more. Now, if you're not an American, I can see why that would be boring. A lot of the talk of politics about Alex going into politics and what he wants to do with his career, and if he wants to run for Senate, if he wants to be a lawyer, you know, that kind of stuff. I think that I can see why that's boring even to an American, but I actually like books like that. So I did end up giving this 5 stars. Not going to stay here for much longer. A lot of people are going to be reviewing this month. I'm 100% sure that everyone I know has read this book, even people who don't read contemporary. So if you're a fan of contemporary, if you're a fan of male-male romance, if you're a fan of politics, wanting to learn or just read a little bit more about the backstory or like the background on US politics, I think you'd really like this. So definitely my favorite read of the month, hands down. I read it in like 2 days. I absolutely inhaled this book. All right, everyone, so that is going to be it for my wrap up. Those are all the books I read in June.